Welcome back. And coming up next in question time, find out the cost benefit of Nigeria's concession deals. Dr. Chidi Izuwah, the Director General of the ICRC, is our guest. Stay with us. Let me take you up on the issue of transparency, because that's what many of the investors are complaining of, that ICRC gives out outline business case compliance certificates to unworthy investors, and that is why we see cases of controversy and deadlock in many of these concessioning deals, and that's why we also see why many of this this investment amounts to something more like a stillbirth.
Okay, with due respect, sir, let me correct some misconception. The ICRC does not issue any outline business certificate to any investor. The outline business case is issued during the development phase of the project. It's an internal government process.
So what do you issue the outline business case?
The outline business case, we issue it to MDAs. There are a couple of 7 factors that are very crucial. First one is viability. So if an MDA, like the national carrier, when the business case was sent to us, what we look at the business case is, look, is this a viable transaction? Is it financially viable? Is it economically viable? If an investor arranges debt and equity and provides a service, are the cash flows coming from that service sufficient to pay back the debt and provide returns to the equity?
But just to help you with your point, so that we can get it straight. You called for a state of emergency.
Yes.
On the state of Nigeria's infrastructure. You recently called for a declaration of state of emergency on Nigeria's infrastructure.
The reason why we did that is that you can agree with me.
You don't think that's an indictment that that most of these brokered arrangements failed?
No, but that's the point I'm trying to make to you. As I said to you, we have 69 projects on our website. If you know, because I think it is factual. The MMA airport in Lagos has challenges, but it delivered an airport with private sector capital. Now, those challenges don't mean it is a failure.
In managing this concessioning deals, how do you deal with the problem of liquidity? Liquidity.
Now, this is liquidity. This is the point that if you have a bankable transaction, and that's the point I want to make. I've made that point over and over again. Bankable transactions means investors have confidence in it. There will be no liquidity problem. The investors will bring the capital because it's bankable. What we do in ICRC is to make sure that in the development phase, only projects which are bankable, because once projects are bankable, they're able to attract capital. But what happens is that a bad project will not attract capital, and a bad project will not get an ICRC OBC certificate of compliance.
Do you think Nigeria's refineries are bankable?
Nigeria's refineries will be bankable if we don't regulate the price. Don't forget, it is in our own larger interest as a society to deregulate the sector, because once you have price controls, it is difficult. If you're an investor and you know that somebody can come in tomorrow and determine the price at which you sell your goods, how will you feel as an investor?
What do you mean, in the light of all this, what do you make of the inconsistent forex policy the CBN is operating right now?
No, I think there's nothing inconsistent about the policy. What the CBN has done, and don't forget, we are still an economy that we need to diversify our sources of foreign exchange.
A lot of investors feel that it's fraudulent.
In what sense, sir?
Given a lopsided access to forex and at different rates.
Well,
how do you justify that?
Well, the point is that you see, you're looking at forex policy. The way I look at forex policy, for me, the way it affects me, it's the investors who invest in our PPP projects. And frankly, the investors who invest in our PPP projects, do capital importation. And the capital importation they do, also allows them to export capital.
Is there a fixed rate for the PPP transaction under the ICRC concession?
No, the PPP policy is not a foreign exchange regulatory guideline. So the PPP policy has to operate within the macro FX requirements. And if you know any investor who has invested here, who is complaining about those things in terms of the PPPs. And frankly, what happens is that...
Do you think the lack of synergy, because I believe that the CBN, the financial institutions, the ICRC, even the BP, people have argued that they should be working in sync. Do you think that the lack of synergy amongst these agencies could be contributing to the slow and sloppy ride in the federal government's concession and arrangements?
No, but I think I've addressed this. There is no slow and sloppy ride.
Because Nigerians are yet to feel the impact on a large scale now in the areas of critical infrastructure.
I mean, and the point I made to you about
the roads are still bad. The federal roads are still very bad.
The point I made to you about critical infrastructure is that the deficit at the start of this administration is very huge. It will take time to clear. I recently drove from Lagos to Abeokuta. I couldn't compare that drive with what it was, 4 years ago. So changes are happening. The first agenda at any FEC meeting should be infrastructure. If we get our country to that level, just like if you recall what happened 25 years ago with seat belts, why did seat belts become very accepted? Because we declared an emergency around it and everybody was focused on it. If every Nigerian focused on infrastructure...
Perhaps the public needs to get you right. When you use the word, strong word like declaring emergency on the infrastructure sector,
yes.
Does that suggest an increased funding or increased commitments and funding?
Everything.
You recently came up with a very scary statistics that Nigeria loses 2.03 trillion naira annually as a result of poor infrastructure. What does this say about the federal government reform program?
It is not just about Nigeria. It's about Africa, that we lose 2% of our GDP, due to poor infrastructure. But Benga, poor infrastructure is a business opportunity. That's the point I'm making. Just like our mobile phones. What happened 16 years ago? 16 years ago, we had 500 phones. Some people saw it as a problem. Other people saw it as what? As an opportunity.
You mean the loss of 2.03 trillion naira is an opportunity, is an advantage for Nigeria?
I'm saying
because 2.03
the point I'm making is that,
a lot.
That's what I'm saying. It is due to the lack of infrastructure. This deficit we have, it's really, probably one of the most massive opportunities in the world, for we to partner with the private sector, provide social infrastructure, and drive our economy.
What's happening to the Ajaokuta Steel Complex?
The Ajaokuta Steel Complex, government is working on it. What we have just done, we have worked, the Ajaokuta company has gone through, fits and so. What has happened is that this government is taking a realistic view. The government is just now about procuring a structural transaction advisor who will come in and determine, basically do a proper diagnostic.
Before we wind down this conversation now, we have a system where we have the Asset Management Company of Nigeria, AMCON.
Yeah.
We have the Bureau of Public Enterprises, and we also have the Infrastructure Regulatory Commission, Infrastructure Concession Regulatory Commission, ICRC, also managing public-private partnership investment in the area of critical infrastructure. Does this not signify multiplicity of roles?
No, it doesn't. And we also have the Bureau for Public Procurement. I need to complete that process for you. Okay. We have the Bureau. Now, what happens is that procurement is a continuum. And you have what is called traditional procurement. What you pay from the budget, that is what the BPP regulates. Then at the far end of it, you have privatization and commercialization, where government will divest. Because there are certain things that government is not good at doing. So if government has involved, government will divest and commercialize those things. That is what the BPP regulates. ICRC regulates public-private partnerships. So each of these procurement processes have their different due process requirements. For example, if you're doing traditional procurement, you're looking at the lowest bidder. The lowest bidder today may not give you, a PPP arrangement is over 20 years, 25 years, 30 years. The lowest bidder today may not give you the most economic price over the life cycle of the transaction. So it's a different mindset. It's a different regulatory requirement. And also, the risk allocations that are involved are different. So each of these parties regulates a different clear. Our mandates are very clear in our laws. It's also very clear in our mind. But we are all there to do good for Nigeria.
the Acting Director General and Chief Executive Officer of the Infrastructure Concession Regulatory Commission, Engineer Chidi Izuwah. Thank you so much for making our time to be part of this episode of Question Time. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Wish you the
very
very best of luck.
Thank you very much.